Hey everyone, welcome to Sociastrology. Today we're going to look at the week of September 1st through the 7th and take this through day by day. I'll also give you probably the best electional chart for this week as we get into it to kind of plan your actions around that time for best results. And we will look at kind of what's coming ahead beyond this week a bit, so that we can also start planning for that as well. But yeah, if you are interested in content like this, I'm going to start doing weekly forecasts, I think, each week, as long as that is something that you guys like. So definitely let me know if this is something that you're interested in. I feel like whenever I was doing the monthly forecasts, it was, one, it would result in a very long video, and two, it would kind of feel like a little bit too far off, and I feel like I might be a little bit more comfortable with doing this week by week. That way I can delve into things a little bit more. As you guys know, I'm a bit long-winded, so when I have a big topic to cover, the videos tend to get very long. So yeah, do let me know if this is something of interest to you, and I think it'll also push me to give you guys electional charts each week to try and make the best of every week rather than just each month, because I know that you can't always wait a few weeks to launch something or whatnot. So yeah, with all of that said, if you're new here, please do consider subscribing. We do transits here. We look into astrological transits. We also do a lot of mundane astrology, so cultural and political astrology and things like this. So if that's something you're interested in, then please do subscribe. And if you don't mind, please do give the video a thumbs up. That helps me out with the algorithm so much. And it helps the channel to grow. So I really appreciate that. And it also indicates to me whether or not you want me to do more content like this going forward. So without any further introduction, let's dive into it. So one thing that we can look forward to is recently Venus has moved back into Libra here. And that's going to help us out quite a bit, because recently, in the past week or so, week plus, certainly since Mercury moved into Leo and the Sun moved into Virgo, we don't have any planets really that are in their own signs. We have Neptune. You never really want to rely on Neptune for much of anything, other than definitely being there, you know? So we haven't really had a lot to lean on and to rely on. And having Venus in Libra here is going to help us out with that a lot. Now, we will also later on have Mercury move into Virgo, and that'll give us really excellent electional charts for when Mars also moves out of Gemini. And I'll show you why in a moment. But I did want to kind of point out that Venus is in its own sign now, and that's very helpful. But additionally, one thing that I think will be pretty nice about that is that Venus in Virgo is in its fall. So it is not very happy there. It doesn't necessarily like to perform there because things are very analytical and practical in Virgo. And Venus would really rather be in a more kind of feeling or sentimental social environment. And so that's why it doesn't do the greatest in Virgo. It's at least not in its best mood. In terms of Venus and Virgo people, you are very lovely people, and I like you guys so much because you're very helpful. So I'm not putting people down, but I will say that Venus isn't the most thrilled in Virgo, and it's been ruling Uranus, which is in its sign. So Venus rules Uranus as long as it is in Taurus, its other sign. And so having the ruler of Uranus, which is in itself in its fall, also in its fall, is making this Uranus a little bit more likely to behave along the lines of a malefic planet rather than a benefic planet. And I am a strong believer that Uranus can do either of those things. I believe really all of the planets can, but especially the outer planets can behave in either way. So it will help us with Uranus to make the surprises a little less oh no, shocking, and a little bit more, oh, okay, well, that went better than expected, you know? So that is one thing that I want to point out that's kind of nice about this coming week. But additionally, it's a lot of planetary motion that we are looking at rather than specifically aspects that are occurring this week. So we're a little bit more quiet when it comes to aspects. And I will get into the best electional time for this week when we get to it. But let's dive into the day to day. So for the 1st of September 2024, as far as this goes, the ascendant and midheaven, actually, they do not matter. Let me just straight up take those away. Okay, there we go. That is much more like it. So we don't need the ascendant and midheaven because everyone's all over the planet, and this is set for Tulsa, Oklahoma, where I am. I also have the ascendant set, or the rising sign here. The house system is based on 0 Aries, just kind of pointing that out. The planets will move around and the chart will be anchored. Now, for the 1st of September, again, mostly independent planet motions today. So we have the moon will square Uranus as it is going retrograde. And that may make that jolt of Uranus changing its direction a little stronger. There may be some personal experience of surprise or shock that comes into our lives on a personal level during this day, really, when Uranus is changing direction. But we also additionally, with Uranus here, have a mutually applying square with Mercury. So the important thing here is that it stopped and it's about to go retrograde for a while. So that is something that we should be feeling during that day. There may be things that just out of the blue don't work. You know, we may have communications disruptions. We may have, it's in Taurus. You might be putting on your makeup and then suddenly, you know, like in one of these kind of silly videos that we see online, like if you wind up doing eyeliner and you poke yourself in the eye and your eyes start watering, and then you're like, oh, well, now the eyeliner is all over my face, you know, kind of situations. So definitely expect the unexpected, no matter how cliche that is, when Uranus is stationing and changing directions here. We also have during this day, Pluto will enter Capricorn again. And I just did a video about that you can look at, but I'm going the wrong way on this. So let me bring this forward. I think it's going to be, yeah, it's in the evening in Central Time. So calculate that according to your own time zone. But in the evening, Pluto will be changing signs back into Capricorn, and it will be there for 2.5 months. So it will move finally back into Aquarius around November 19th Central Time in the US. So that's going to be something that we'll be keeping an eye on as well. We'll just put that back there so we can keep that in mind. Now, again, this mutually applying square between Mercury and Uranus. Again, communications may be breaking down at times. Technologies could do things that are kind of funky and weird, potentially software issues. Mercury is, of course, no longer retrograde, but it is going through the area that it did just retrograde through. So there may be things that you had no idea went a little bit wrong in August in terms of something that you communicated or something that you planned, really anything along those lines, even a software update that you did in August that may go awry during this time, and that you may need to kind of revise and look at and do again. So, for instance, I recently had to uninstall and then reinstall a specific software because it suddenly just one aspect of it suddenly inexplicably stopped working. And so I reinstalled it and everything has been fine since. But these are the kinds of annoying little things that we can see during these kinds of periods where Uranus and Mercury are in a hard aspect to each other. And additionally, when either one of them is retrograde, and again, despite the fact that Mercury is direct right now, we do have to keep in mind that it's still going back through that area where it was retrograde. So we are still having to look over the things that we've been doing in recent months, in July and August in particular. So that is really kind of mostly what we have for this day. We will have Mercury and the moon conjunct earlier in the day. Let's see when that is. It's pretty much around dawn Central Time. So that may be a little bit of a pleasant, kind of period of time in the early morning hours Central Time, where those are in contact in a sign that is pretty gregarious. There may be a pleasant morning to be had in the US. And yeah, other than that, that's mostly what we have that's new during this time. It's pretty significant because, again, we have Uranus stationing and we have Pluto changing signs. So this in and of itself is disruptive enough. There's definitely going to be some weird stuff going on during this day, and it will probably be due to things that are outside of yourself, things that you can't control because of the fact that those are outer planets that are doing kind of unusual motions in the sky during this period of time. I will also point out that this Uranus is stationing exactly at the point where, so we just had a full moon in Aquarius that was at 27 degrees and 15 minutes, and Uranus was square to that. And what is really significant about this is that it is hearkening back to that. Try and remember what day it was, the 19th of August that we had that full moon. And so this Uranus was already square to that. So it was already involved in that whole situation, but it is now at that exact degree stationing. So this is very significant. And this is going to be a trigger point all week because, as you'll notice, this isn't really going to move. Once an outer planet stations and it starts changing direction, it takes a long time to get it to turn around. It's like, a giant ship when you're trying to turn it around. So that is really significant. Additionally, I did want to point out that it will come back to pretty close to this point again in February of 2026, where we may have a similar kind of topic come up around that point as well. But yeah, so I think that is mostly what I have for the 1st of September. So let's go ahead to the 2nd. Okay, so on the 2nd of September, we have a full moon. So let me actually direct us to that time. Exactly. Okay. So that is going to be occurring in the evening, pretty much 9 p.m. Central Time. And it is occurring at 11 degrees and 4 minutes on this day. And it's forming a very wide T-square, which is wide enough that it actually doesn't really show up here. This is square to Jupiter here. The moon will just continue to get closer to that point. So what we have here is a T-square aspect pattern. The sun and moon are in wide opposition to Saturn. Saturn is square to Jupiter, and Jupiter is in a very, very wide square that will be tightening throughout this day to the sun and moon. So it is bringing in these big topics that we've been discussing on this channel recently about this square between Jupiter and Saturn that has everything to do with plans and how far along you are in plans that may have been birthed or seeded in very late December 2020 that you've been working on since the Jupiter-Saturn Great Conjunction, and that those plans are at a point where there needs to be some adjustment made in order to make them more sustainable and so forth. So that issue is coming up for us on a personal level during this day. So we'll want to continue to kind of look at that, especially as this square builds between the moon and these planets on this day. And then with the sun moving into these aspects with Saturn and Jupiter in the coming days as well. So this is a great time to check in on that. It's a new moon, so it's a great time to start things, any sort of changes that you're wanting to make about something. This would be a good time to start to implement some of those things. Now, I do also want to point out that notice that the sun and the moon, the lines here are the aspects that are made, and the sun and the moon here are not making a lot of aspects. One thing that they are doing is they are in an exact quintile aspect with Mars here. I don't have those aspects turned on, so you'll kind of have to take my word for it, but I think it's about 4 to 7 minutes off of an exact quintile. So again, taking action should be relatively favored during this time in terms of things that you have planned out. So when we have a quintile aspect, it tends to favor the action that's taken. It tends to offer a sort of spirited or kind of honored or almost exalted kind of interaction between the energies that are occurring. And given that this is the sun and the moon, this is the intention and the action, and we also have action here with Mars. So you should be able to take some pretty solid steps during this day toward some sort of goals that you have, especially if it has to do with doing something in a very new way. That would be a really excellent way to kind of express this energy during this day as well. Now, I do want to point out it's kind of late in the day. So for instance, in Europe, this would be already the next day as far as I can. Yeah, that would be 3 hours off. So yeah, you guys would already be in the wee hours of the 3rd. It's pretty late in the day, and we don't necessarily want to start things earlier in the day. You can get false starts that way. If you don't mind a false start, that's totally fine. But if you kind of want to start and then keep momentum, it would be at the new moon point and beyond that you would actually want to kind of start that. So the timing might be a little bit awkward, but certainly going into the next day, you should be able to do that. Now, we also have this new moon is conjunct to the fixed star Zosma. I'm not exactly sure how that is pronounced, but that's how it's spelled, as Zosma. And it is the Delta star in the constellation of Leo. And so we're doing tropical zodiac. This is in the constellation of Leo, even though it is in the sign of Virgo. So what Joseph Rieger says about this star is that there's a love of life, and that this brings power to win over others, potential sudden fame and sudden losses. A grandly liberal kind of personality is implied by this, but a changeable nature that is subject to losses, unhappiness of mind, unknown fears, and that is shameless and egotistical. So one thing that we will want to check in on here, especially given the opposition to Saturn with this happening in this degree, is I really honed in on this unhappiness of mind. I saw that across various authors. I've included Joseph Rieger's delineation of this star here because I felt like he hit all of the points that all of the authors were speaking to about this star pretty well. But that unhappiness of mind really came up with everyone. And so we want to try to, make sure that we're not feeling a little bit maybe depressed during this day, or that we might feel a little bit low motivation. And again, if that's the case, it's okay to not start things on this day. You can take this energy into the next day as well, to try to maybe avoid having any sort of negative feelings bound up with something that is started. We might want for that moon to really move off of that point at least. Now, all of the other delineation that I just gave that Rieger wrote, we could probably see a lot of that come up in mundane affairs. So issues of power over others, sudden fame and sudden losses, changeability, shamelessness, and egotism. That may be something that we very much see out in the world or in the news during this day. I do also want to point out in terms of mundane astrology that this new moon is square to Russia's Mercury in Sagittarius, and it is near to their Jupiter. So we will probably be receiving some sort of news from Russia directly. So some sort of message from them, probably about the war or whatnot, possibly about some sort of gains of theirs because of the fact that the new moon is near to their Jupiter this time around. And it is also near to Iran's Saturn. So hopefully that is an indication of, especially considering the fact that therefore their Saturn is in a sign-based opposition to transiting Saturn. Hopefully they will be behaving with restrained action during this period of time, because it certainly would not be wise to start any action with a new moon that is near to their Saturn anyway. So it is Iran, so hopefully they have some astrologers working on things, and those astrologers are telling them to not act during this period of time. And hopefully then we can put that out of the possibility of things escalating there by the time that they would. This is also square to Israel's Mercury, which is in Gemini. And so we may get some sort of weird or bad news out of Israel, or a message from them that doesn't really land very well. This is also square to Biden's Saturn. So for those of you on Biden watch and concerned about him, it's about 2 degrees off, and it is a new moon, but that would be something to kind of look at. I don't think that we would really be seeing him much on this day, at least publicly. There may even be him needing to consider how to respond to any sort of developments that might happen on this day. It's also near to Kamala's Uranus. Kamala Harris has Uranus and Pluto and Venus in Virgo, but they're a little farther on. So her Uranus, as far as I remember, is at 13 degrees of Virgo. So this is pretty close to that. So possibly some surprising news from her or to her, possibly about polling numbers or something like that, either going up or going down. And then additionally, this is square to Palestine's North Node. So we may see some weird news, coming out of the, Israel-Palestine situation during this new moon. Hopefully better news than we've been getting recently. Now, additionally, during this day, Mars is also going to perfect its square to Neptune. So this is, again, potentially putting energy into things that aren't what they seem. And so that is why that's along the lines, at least, of kind of what I was saying of, you may not want to put your energy into something just before the actual new moon happens, because you can get false starts. Double, triple that with that Mars square to Neptune. It could be not only a false start, but a start on something that isn't even what it looks like. So I would not necessarily recommend too much action before at least the perfection of this. Once it does perfect, then yeah, you can start taking your steps towards something. But you do want to keep in mind that we don't necessarily want to be working on things out of the blue here. That square between Saturn and Jupiter is really representative of time. So this would be something that you would want to have been planning for a little while if you're going to be starting something on this day, because your kind of knee-jerk instinct, hey, I suddenly want to do this kind of action with Mars in Gemini here is square to Neptune in Pisces, which is potentially action that is, there's not a clear picture. Like there's some sort of delusion or confusion around it. And so that would be something to keep an eye open for. It's a weird day, but a new moon is useful for taking the initial like symbolic steps on things. So let's see here. Let's move that to noon again and then take this forward to the 3rd. So as you can see, we have the moon is perfecting that opposition to Saturn and the square to Jupiter. The moon will actually be aspecting like all of the planets that are in late degrees during this day. So we'll look at that. But I did feel like today also looks a little bit frustrating. On the heels of that new moon, it may be, again, a little bit difficult to get things going. And there may be like, you know, kind of no explanation really as to why. And there may also be a sense today of tiredness, especially toward the end of the day, like more than usual. And the reason that I say that is, again, we had that new moon on what's definitely not the worst star, but a little bit disconnected and, you know, a little bit questionable in terms of the energy of that new moon. But what we have is when we get a little bit later in the day, then we have the moon making some interesting aspects. So notice how many lines just developed off of this point here. So as it starts to move into the 3rd decan, the last 10 degrees of Virgo here, the moon will be reaching out to Mars, Jupiter, Neptune, Uranus, Saturn, even. It'll be actually releasing that a little bit, and then also to Pluto. So the moon is taking in a lot of energy during this day, and toward the end of the day, it's getting into this opposition with Neptune, which, considering the fact that it's in these stressful aspects to everything else, which kind of represents energy in general, could really bring you into a lull of sleep. So hopefully the one thing that we can get out of this day that's really pleasant is a restful night, but it's just looking a little bit frustrated. You know, I mean, Mars is really on the edge of Cancer here. I think it's going to be moving in. Yeah, it'll be moving in the tomorrow on the 4th. And there's just not a lot that's great that's going on during this day. Again, it could all be worse. I don't think that this is going to be disastrous or anything. I just think that in terms of the action that you're taking, that there will be kind of continual little frustrations that you will need to overcome, and that will prove a little bit more exhausting than you would necessarily think. So yeah, the 3rd, it's not the most fun. We'll just put it like that, you know? So let us again take this back to 12 noon and go to the 4th. So on the 4th, we have the moon is now moving into Libra after having spent the past couple days in Virgo. And we have a kite that has just formed with it when it was in those later degrees. When I was saying that you may be getting kind of tired, the kite was really playing into that. And I will show you that properly here. When the moon is in these late degrees, it is opposite to Neptune and trine to Pluto and Uranus. And then, as I mentioned early in the video, we have this aspect pattern between the outer planets and then this grand trine here. So this forms a kite. And so again, it's kind of like, okay, what's actually going on here? You know, it it's a very unclear energy, and that can be really frustrating when you're just trying to get something done, you know? So try not to get discouraged over these days, is really kind of what I'm trying to get at here. And then when the moon moves into Libra, it will immediately start to conjunct Venus here. So this is nicer, at least. Venus is happy. It's in its own sign. The moon applying to Venus there should make interactions with other people a lot more pleasant. It should make them a lot more rational. If there have been people who have been representing the frustration of the past couple of days, that should lessen up a little bit. You should be able to interact with some people that you actually enjoy during this day and get kind of predictable reactions and interaction out of them during that time. But we also have this T-square that I mentioned forming much more strongly with the sun now. This is going to continue to build up during this day. And this is kind of, it's anchoring our own kind of personal sense of ourselves and our own personal kind of confidence and self-esteem to some really big questions about ourselves and our lives throughout this period of time, with this opposition between the sun and Saturn, and then both of those being square to Jupiter here. Basically, the way that this is playing out is like I was saying, the Jupiter-Saturn square that we have pretty much throughout this year is really asking us about our plans and what about them isn't sustainable, so that we can go ahead and fix those things and address them and make those adjustments. Well, this is getting really personal with the sun involved. And there can be a tendency with this to feel like we're not as far along as we would like to be, and to anchor our self-worth, especially with the sun in Virgo, which is already a pretty modest place. This could have us feeling kind of down on ourselves about where we're at in terms of our long-term plans here. So try not to let that happen, and rather try to, as far as you can, without self-flagellating and being too hard on yourself and everything, try to allow this opposition with Saturn to just kind of make you very determined to get things done. That is the best way that this could express itself. So try to take advantage of that when you can, but also try not to be so hard on yourself that even the fun aspects of your plans become not fun anymore, because again, this can be a sun that is really, really hard on itself. So try not to let that happen over the coming days while we have this aspect pattern forming here. But this is, again, it's about getting serious and real about your plans. And there is, like I said, there's the tools and the wherewithal to accomplish something here. You've got it at your fingertips to be able to take action on things that you want to, but just try not to be too hard on yourself. Now, again, we do still have this mutual reception between the sun and Mercury, and this Mercury is ruling Jupiter and Mars here. So again, the planning that you've been doing in recent months is kind of under the microscope here in terms of your action, the action that you're taking on it now. Again, try to push through any sort of frustrations or, little unexpected things that pop up, or those little tinges of feeling like, man, I wish that I was just beyond whatever aspect of this that you're dealing with at this time. Just keep pushing through that, There could also, throughout this period of time when this is building up, this T-square, because it's ruled by Mercury, and Mercury is in this mutually applying square aspect with Uranus, these two can definitely indicate disrupted plans. So, well-laid plans, of course, could be disrupted. But if you are kind of willing to keep pushing through that, you may wind up getting some really surprising insights around your plans and around your goals, and finding surprisingly easier and less frustrating and more effective paths to your goals throughout this period of time, as well as surprising insights with regard to how you see yourself. So if those little feelings, like little self-esteem issues, pop up during this time, maybe look at what triggered that and really start to question that, because there are some definite insights that you can get with the way that these planets are dispositing here. Because I'll just run through the whole thing here real quick in case you are interested. The Saturn that's opposite to the Sun here, that is ruled by Jupiter because it's in Pisces, and Jupiter here is ruled by Mercury because it's in Gemini. Mercury is also ruling this Mars here and the Sun because of the fact that they're in Gemini and Virgo. So all of that is getting funneled into Mercury here, but then Mercury is recalling the Sun because the Sun rules Mercury and vice versa. So the energy is getting ping-ponged back and forth here, but what's being represented within the context of that little ping-pong game between them is all of this whole question about your goals and what you see yourself achieving and what you're going after long term is all bound up in your thoughts, your plans, and your sense of yourself. So that's why I'm saying, like, self-flagellating is not going to help during this time, but the one thing that you could get out of that is the moment that you start to do that, question, wait, what just caused this? So that you can get at the root of that and get that also out of the way for yourself, hopefully going forward, or at least to have a better concept of it going forward so that you have more control over it, so that, these silly issues that, so many of us deal with of self-esteem and so forth don't continue to get in your way to the same extent, So what else do we have here? Mars will move into Cancer during this day. So around 3 p.m., between 2 and 3 Central Time, it'll be moving in. And this is going to make our electional charts better, because then if we want to utilize Jupiter, even though it is in detriment in Virgo here, or in Gemini here, if we want to utilize that in an electional chart, then we can without also having Mars co-present there. Additionally, during this day, we will have both Venus and the Moon getting a pretty tight opposition together with the North Node, which is to say that they're pretty much exactly on the South Node here. So this could be, personally, like falling into habits of comfort, falling into the comfort zone. Potentially, if your self-esteem is triggered during this day, you may want to fall into some old self-soothing habits that maybe aren't the best for you. You may also spend this time kind of reevaluating your relationships. And so if you are able to look at any sort of attachment issues that you may have, as well as any coping mechanisms that you may have, and trying to see if they are really helpful to you or healthy for you, that would be a really good thing to look at as well with the conjunction there. But there may be a strong temptation to fall into some old kind of self-soothing habits on the 4th of September as well. But that is pretty much what we have going on this day. Okay, so let's take this back to noon and then go forward to the 5th of September. Now, there's not really anything going on in terms of transits or in terms of aspects during this day. So today is really a day to assimilate the things that we've been dealing with recently. We've had a lot of aspects going on in the transits that have been pretty strong. Let me put it that way. In recent weeks, and there's a bit of a lull in this week. And I think that we should really embrace that. It may feel a little bit boring throughout this week, but I would kind of embrace it because we have more coming up later that will be a little bit more trying. And so, if we don't take advantage, or even if we do, we may be missing these days of having a little bit less going on in the future. So do try to enjoy it if you can. So yeah, really a day to assimilate everything that's been going on in recent weeks. We have been subjected to a very busy news cycle this entire summer. So just taking a little bit of time off, if you can like tune out of the news and stuff like that during this day, that would be a nice way to utilize this as well. Now, Venus is becoming unaspected during this day for the most part. So notice that the only thing we see here is this red line to Neptune. Let me take this forward some hours because we will have the moon moving pretty rapidly away from Venus throughout this day. So that is a separating aspect, and Venus is not applying any aspect. We may feel a little bit isolated, and I think that that's probably kind of a good thing. Again, like I was saying, it might feel a little bit boring, but I think that we should kind of embrace the fact that there's less going on, and the fact that we can kind of just hopefully connect with ourselves a little bit rather than trying to keep up with others too much during this day. Because I would say, if you were in a situation where you were like, oh man, why do I not feel like going out, or why do I not have plans? Let me go out of my way to try and make plans with someone. I don't think that you would necessarily even enjoy that unless this Venus in particular is connecting somehow to your natal chart. If that's the case, then very possibly, and it could be a really wonderful time where there's not really anything that's getting in the way of having fun with it because of the fact that Venus is unaspected. But if you don't have something that is being aspected by this Venus, you'll probably feel disconnected whether you're around people or not, so I would try to really embrace any sort of isolation that this aspect may bring, specifically on this day, especially given the fact that we have the moon in a trine aspect with Jupiter here. If you can just kind of spend some time either on your own or just doing a regular kind of boring routine day, with your family, I think that you will actually find a lot of enjoyment in that, in your own regular routine, and not necessarily trying to go out and make plans or anything. So yeah, that is what's going on the 5th, which is to say not a whole lot. So let's go back to noon and then take it forward to the 6th of September. So we have the exact Mercury square Uranus during this day. I'll show you when that is a little bit closer to it. So it's like right around the evening time. Yeah, it's like right before the day ends, Central Time. So we have this square that is perfecting between Mercury and Uranus. And as I've been saying, this is mutually applying, which is to say that one of the planets is retrograde, and the retrograde planet was in a later degree than the planet that was direct. And so they were both moving toward a common point rather than just the faster planet moving toward the slower planet and applying, even though that slower planet is also moving away from it. These are both moving toward each other. And so that indicates a level of kind of eagerness. Now, there may be, again, something surprising that comes out in the news in this time in particular, though these things can tend to crop up in significant ways in the world, a couple days before, a couple days after the exact perfection. So we don't always necessarily want to look specifically to this time to see the strongest indication of this transit, but it is perfecting during this period of time. So, a good time for fresh ideas, any sort of innovations that you can take on things, any sort of novelty that you can seek out, especially things like intellectually or socially, trying a new thing, trying a new place, trying to, hang out with new people, any sort of novelty that you can seek during this day might be pretty interesting to you. You might not like it because we do have a square aspect between them, but it should at least prove quite interesting. And we also have with the moon in this sextile aspect that it's perfecting to Mercury, if I can get this cursor to work with me here, a little bit before the exact square between Mercury and Uranus here. This could actually bring some real enjoyment beyond just that something novel could be interesting. It could actually be kind of fun as well. You should probably be able to roll with, whatever surprises arise during this day. And this period of time, this transit here, if you have planets in late degrees, they're getting aspected pretty strongly. I would say, especially if you have anything between 26 and 29 degrees of pretty much any sign, you're going to be getting some pretty strong aspects. So probably surprises coming up for you in your life or in the news that kind of hits in a personal way. It's just, you're getting hit up kind of from all angles. You'll probably be receiving both flowing and hard aspects. So there may be a sense of like a lot going on, a lot of things up in the air that you're kind of juggling during this time, and some surprises then additionally thrown in. But it should be fine. It should be relatively pleasant. I don't see this square as anything necessarily worse than potentially weird, bad news, probably in the world, more so than in our own personal lives. But yeah, I think that's most of what's going on this day. We do have this square that's forming in the evening with Pluto and the moon, but that's not a big deal. We also have these flowing aspects from the moon to Jupiter and then to Mars. But yeah, it looks like just a pretty busy day, but one that is, I don't think, particularly frustrating on a personal level. I think it's just going to be a weird day in the news and then a lot going on personally. So let's go forward to the next day, bring this back to noon. Okay, so this day I also wasn't thrilled with. I do want to say, I'm not like a negative reader. It may sound like it if you're new here, but this week is it's a little weird. It's a bit of a strange week. Today looks a little heavy. It looks like the feelings are a little bit heavy, so do try and keep your head up during this day, because, like I said, in the coming weeks, especially once we get Mercury back into Virgo, that looks awesome. Things start looking like pretty solid for a little while. Really. But today what we have going on is the moon is moving into Scorpio. We have that sun opposite to Saturn is getting really tight. I think that actually perfects today even, maybe. Yeah, like right around midnight of tonight. So that may also be feeling like pretty restrictive and a little bit frustrating. Again, try to focus on the positive as much as you can. One thing that's a little bit nice is that once that sun perfects the opposition to Saturn, then on the other side of that is the square to Jupiter. and that'll be feeling a little bit more fun. It's still a square aspect, but it's really fine. It's between two signs that are ruled by Mercury, and it's two planets that generally like to have fun. So there would probably be a lot of enjoyment of anything data related, anything related to organizing or planning things, any sort of communications or whatnot. There would probably be a lot of enjoyment around that, if not additionally the most like productive work. It may get a little bit sidetracked or something, but there should be a lot of enjoyment of that in the coming days that we have to look forward to on the other side of this transit. But your responsibilities are really kind of coming into focus during this day with that opposition to Saturn. And there is this, I like the fact that this moon is at least offering a sextile and trine off of that opposition. But that moon is in Scorpio. So it's already a moon that isn't necessarily the happiest or pleasant and goofy and silly and jovial. So try your best to like laugh at situations, if sardonically or utilizing sarcasm maybe for humor during this day. Now, like creative, kind of artistically expressive work should be benefited by this entire situation that's going on here, because then it makes that Scorpio moon more of an emotionally expressive energy. And with the Saturn and Pisces here in communication with it, you can definitely express emotion. But a lot of that emotion, unless it's in the form of like creative expression, could potentially really just be a level of frustration. I gotta be honest with you, So we also have a yod forming during this day. I don't have my quincunx aspects turned on here, but it is Mercury is in a yod formation with Pluto and Neptune. Let me actually just turn that on so that you can see it. Do we have it? Yeah. Okay, so these lines are very faint. I'm sorry about that, but this is the yod. We have the quincunx, and then these two are sextile to each other. And what that indicates is usually a relatively, it's called like the finger of God, and this is something that's being pointed to. There's something that's really significant in Mercury that is being pointed to here. So there's probably some sort of information that is coming out in the media or something that is very substantial during this day, where it may have a lot more significance than it even initially looks like it would. And the reason for that is that this yod is created by these outer planets. So there's something with these outer planets, they tend to be generational and cultural and social. So they're like something that's larger than the self, larger than a specific given set of events or situations. It's kind of this kind of collective energy that is pointed straight at Mercury, and it's pointing it out as very significant during this day. And in mundane astrology, Mercury rules the media and information and data and communication. So we may have a bit of a disruption there that is quite significant, or there's some sort of weird news coming out during this time. But this also can kind of increase the likelihood of kind of heavy thoughts, because of the fact that the social is so like kind of permeating in a relatively uncomfortable way, the thoughts and the mind on this day. And so there is also kind of a risk of misunderstanding, or just like not getting something, like I just don't get it, about something. And potentially also the sense of kind of having the weight of the world on your shoulders, at least on a mental or intellectual level during this day and the next, going into the 8th. So it's a heavy day in terms of thoughts. We may that may be kind of almost spurred on by some sort of weird news that we're getting in the media during this day. But Yeah, that's pretty much what I have for the week in terms of the best time to do something. Let me, before I'm driven crazy by these aspects, change them to my usual traditional aspects here. Okay, and then bring this back. Okay, so for our electional chart, this was approximately the best that I could come up with. I would actually recommend, if you are able to wait for whatever you are wanting to launch or do until next week, it'll get a little bit better, and I will explain why in a moment. But around dawn on the 5th, what we have is, depending on what you are wanting to do, we can either get the ascendant ruler to be the sun in the second, and we could then have that disposited by Mercury, which would be in the first. This could potentially be decent for something that is new, that is career related, that is also somehow expressive in terms of communication or art or something like this. This would not be the worst because of the fact that we have this sun dispositor in the first house. The ruler of the first house is then in the second house, which would be, you potentially making money from something that you are doing. And additionally, the moon and Venus in conjunction in the third house. I would possibly even want to bring this forward some minutes to put the moon ahead of Venus if we can. Let's do this by 15 minutes. See if it will change signs. Yeah. So I would actually put the moon ahead of Venus. So we're talking really, really early in the morning here. Now, the issue with this chart is that we have Uranus in the 10th. So this is why I'm saying, like, something that would be new would be okay, because then that Uranus can express as, okay, something surprising and new. We wouldn't really necessarily want to continue things that are related to the career with that there, because then this would play out as some sort of potential upsetting surprise or something. We also have Jupiter in the 11th, so you could potentially get support from others with regard to this. And we have removed the malefics from any sort of angular houses, unless we were to take Uranus as a malefic, which I don't. Now, if we were to take this forward a bit and we wanted to really focus on then putting Jupiter in the 10th, which I am a fan of, then the problem is that the ascendant ruler would be in the 12th house. And we don't really want that. I would actually rather have Jupiter in the 11th and have the ascendant ruler in the second house than to change that ascendant and put Mercury in the 12th there. And there's just kind of no way around that, because then the midheaven is moving after the ascendant. So that's kind of all that I really have for a decent electional chart, is like really early in the morning on the 5th of September. Now, what I do want to point out is, let's take this forward some days here. There's something that I absolutely love that we will soon be able to play with. And that is, oh, it already happened. So yeah, around the 9th, then what we can do is put Mercury in the first house, and it will rule the ascendant, and it will rule Jupiter. And then we will have Jupiter in the 10th house. So we can put Jupiter in the 10th and have its ruler be in the first with obviously the ascendant there. So this is something that I love to do for an electional chart, is to play with the mutable signs and the angles, because the mutable signs each they rule signs that are square to each other. So you can put on the first and the 10th cusp a sign, or two signs, of course, that are ruled by the same planet. And so that's something that I really love to do. And I would really aim for dawn-ish going forward, starting the 9th. You kind of can't go wrong with doing stuff around dawn, your time of the 9th, whenever the ascendant is in Virgo there. Additionally, during this time, during Virgo season, we also have the sun there in the first house. So that's really wonderful. We do have Saturn and Neptune in the 7th, but those aren't really the worst. I wouldn't necessarily, it's very early in the morning, so this would mostly be not great for meeting with someone, So I would definitely take advantage of that going forward. I will remind you guys about that again next week. But yeah, this is pretty much when I would plan for things like that, is to take those forward. And in this particular case, the moon is actually void, of course, so maybe not the best, but we'll get into that for future electional charts in future weeks. But yeah, so that is the week of the 1st through the 7th of September. I hope that this was helpful to you. I will try to kind of tighten these videos up a bit. And so if you have any sort of suggestions on, how to present all of the information in a way that's a little bit more clear, then do feel free to share those. But yeah, other than that, if you enjoyed this video, then please do give it a thumbs up, as that helps me out with the algorithm a lot. And if you're new here, please do consider subscribing for future content. And yeah, other than that, I hope you have a beautiful week, and I will see you soon. Bye.